So, there's Max is talking. There's a lot of, changes as society becomes more aware of different things. It changes us on an individual and societal level. Max used to be, I used to be a vegetarian when I was younger in my teen years. And eventually I realized that for me it wasn't right because I realized if I actually genuinely cared about animals, me not eating them wasn't really going to help them because it's like an industry. So I should be fighting that industry or helping them have better conditions, is the conclusion we personally reached. However, we also realized a different thing. Personally, we believe you should be able to eat whatever kind of meat you want under the condition you would be willing to kill it. Here's the thing though, we're a hypocrite because the truth is there are some animals I think we could easily kill and eat. Fish, technically we have before, at least once. Um, Chicken, I feel like we could do it. I feel like if I had a chicken and it was like there and it looked edible, I feel like I would be able to kill the chicken and prepare it and eat it if I knew how to do that. Goose, same thing. I think if it's a goose or a duck, I would be willing to hunt and eat a goose or a duck. However, once it gets into like bigger animals like cows or even like pigs or like elk, I don't personally believe that we are capable of looking at a cow, like a full adult cow, or a full adult pig, or a full adult elk, and killing it, like hunting it with a weapon and eating it and preparing it ourselves. And for me, this creates a sort of cognitive dissonance because if we just said, well, we believe you should be able to eat whatever you want as long as you would be willing to kill it yourself, but we're not willing to kill it ourselves. So then we're not living by our own rules there. So how do we justify that? And personally, the way that we personally justify that for ourselves is we live in extreme poverty. Healthier food, especially when it comes to like vegetarian options and things, is outside generally of my price range. And essentially, most of the things that we eat because it's what we have. We eat because it's what we can afford. And so, how we personally think of it is for us, we're okay with eating meat because even though it's going against one of our beliefs, if we didn't, we wouldn't have the nutrients and sustenance we need to in order to keep surviving. So even though it's not as direct as we would prefer, because preferably it would be, okay, I'm trading this creature's life so that my life can continue. I'm aware of the process that goes into this creature dying for me to continue living, because all life on this planet is contingent on taking life from another thing. All life on Earth is contingent on death to some extent, and is contingent on the decay or the consuming of life. And so for us personally, when we think of it this way, we're like, okay, well, I'm not directly involved with the things that I'm eating, but for the most part, I eat like mostly, I would say, like whatever is available. And even though if I was actually like living up to my own expectations, there would mostly be eating like fish and chicken. We don't eat, we wouldn't say, as much red meat as is typical for certain people and certain families, and we don't feel guilt about it either. And so it's like, okay, well, if we say that this is one rule, but then we don't have guilt, why don't we have guilt then if we think that is the right thing to do? And so I think maybe there isn't necessarily a right. I can be aware that an industry is harmful. I can be aware that I don't support an industry, but still consume animals. I can be aware that I wouldn't want to kill that animal, but it is what I can afford. It's what is there, and if I don't eat what is there, then I'm not getting enough nutrients myself to continue surviving. And so I guess it's just sort of like part of it is like, as conscious, sapient, aware creatures, we have a choice, right? Where like that's one of the things people say, right? Is like we have a choice, whereas those other creatures that are contingent on death don't have a choice. We kind of disagree with that. We think if you're like rich or middle class, you have a choice of to what you eat. You have a choice, like you can go out and like eat just kind of whatever you want to eat, right? But for someone like me, I'm just eating what I have, whatever I get. So, and honestly fairly consistently going hungry lately, but it's, it's whatever. We're just in a rough period and we're doing the best we can. But I feel like personally, the reason we used to be a vegetarian wasn't because really of anything to do with the animals. It was because we felt bad. And that's not going to change anything. Feeling bad, feeling uncomfortable isn't going to help an already dead animal. It's not going to help change a system that is taking too many animals, or that is putting them in inhumane conditions. Because here's the reality, right? If the conditions were kind that animals were living in that we were eating, I don't think I'd have an issue with it then, even though I still think it would be better if it was very direct, if we were just taking for the continuation of our own life rather than it being like shrouded and not really knowing where these things are coming from, or like where we're getting our food, or like what is going into it, right? um and even though I think that would be better, that's not the world we live in, and that's not the world humans have lived in for hundreds of years, and I don't think it's the world humans are going to be living in until at least another 50 years. And personally, I think that it is good to be aware of how you feel about different things and to reach your own conclusions on things. And even though um, we do feel like we would not personally be able to look at a cow and kill it because it's too close, we feel like, to our kind of physical form. It feels too close to us. Whereas like a chicken or a goose or like a fish, we don't have those feelings, right? But then it's still based off of our own feelings. And in a way, we feel like it doesn't really matter, because if we're going off of like intelligence, right? That doesn't really make sense, because by that same reasoning, people could justify cannibalism. But then when it comes to cannibalism, our take is that, well, if they consented to it, and if they're already, like, if they're dead already when you found them, or they consented to it beforehand, then we think it's okay. Because, people gotta eat whatever they have access to, but, like, we wouldn't personally. But, yeah, so it's like, on one hand, I think people consume things all the time that we understand to some extent aren't necessarily right. But it's not really about whether it's wrong or right, is it? Because that's all, it's, again, morality is a man made invention. It's really about, are you holding yourself to your own beliefs? And on one hand, we're not. But on the other hand, we're not in a position in our life where we have resources where we can afford to be being more picky. When we were a teenager, we had access to a lot more of those like resources. We had access to more food. We had access to choice, and we had that privilege, right? And we're self-sufficient now as an adult. We have zero contact with the people from our dead life, essentially, except for like one and some extended family. But pretty much it's very, very minimal there, and we don't have those privileges anymore. So we are able to balance it as if, another way is like, if there was another creature that could eat me and that saw me as food, even though I am an intelligent being, right? If it's starving or like very hungry, or like it doesn't have a better option, am I going to be upset at that creature for trying to eat me? Well, personally, I'd be scared. I'd be upset. I don't want to be eaten by another creature. But I feel like I'd understand if I survived it, like looking back and be like, well, that animal was hungry, right? And it's like it has to eat something, and it just I was there. So I don't know. It's just interesting questions.